Hey there, this is Ayliean. I just wanted to let you know up top that this podcast will contain a mention of parental death and drug misuse. I know it's not normally what you'd expect in a maths podcast. It will be very brief. I'll let you know when it's coming up and you can skip past it if it is not for you. I do want you to know that I'm speaking from personal experience and that I am happy, I am okay, I'm loved, I'm safe, thank you very much. So I do think it's an important issue to talk about, and thank you very much for listening to it.
Hello, I'm Katie Steckles.
And I'm Peter Rowlett. Hi Katie, what's today's mathematical object?
Today's mathematical object is a parallelepiped, or however this is pronounced. Everyone pronounces it differently, but it is a shape and I love it very much. And I've brought someone along to tell us all about this shape and some stories about it. So welcome, Ayliean.
Hello, yes, my name is Ayliean and everyone pronounces it differently. It's Ayliean like an alien. I'm generally an internet maths person and I want to talk about what I would call the parallelepiped today. Peter, what's your pronunciation?
I don't know. I don't know if I've ever tried. It's a thing that I've seen written down.
Just pick a syllable and emphasise that syllabole. Parallelepiped.
Just pick an unusual one, yeah.
I had someone wildly correct me one time that it should be parallelepiped, and then I'm sure a friend of the pod, Colin Wright, said to me really nice, encouraging, wise words, which were, if someone pronounces something wrong, that means, exactly like Peter's saying, they got that information from reading, and so you shouldn't make fun of them because it's hard-earned knowledge and information, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, well, that makes total sense. Also, I mean, it doesn't matter, right? It's a word. And
True.
If loads of people pronounce it in different ways, that just means it's a word with many pronunciations. But it is for anyone who's never heard this word before, and we keep saying it in different ways. a parallelepiped is how it's spelled, I guess. And what is that?
The best way to imagine it would be to imagine a cuboid or square. Square, oh my gosh, great start to a maths podcast. Cuboid or cube. And then hold on to two of the corners and just kind of skew it out a little bit. So it's like a cube, but made of rhombuses or parallelograms.
Okay, so I guess it's like the 3D analogy of that you take a square and turn it into a rhombus, or you take a rectangle and turn it into a parallelogram. This is like the 3D version of that. So you take a cuboid and you just kind of bash it over a bit, and it sort of leans.
I think we're all kind of pushing on the top and sliding it sideways at the same time. Right?
So it goes a little bit squint. That is interesting though, because you do get different classes of parallelepiped based on, if you only skew them in one axis or along two axes.
Yeah, for anyone listening to this podcast in audio format, if you can imagine someone putting both their hands up and then leaning them both across at the same time at the same angle, that's probably the visual you need. You can feel free to do that yourself if it helps. But I guess because you've got like more degrees of freedom in 3D, so you could probably skew it in multiple directions. I mean, I have no idea what my hands are doing for that, but like to skew it sort of in the X and the Y direction at the same time.
If anyone remembers the dance Big Fish, Little Fish, Cardboard Box, that's essentially what's going on right now. Trying to describe the parallelepipeds.
Yeah, so I guess it's like it's a 3D solid and it's going to have the same number of faces as a cuboid. Like it's just like not as regular, not as 90 degrees-ish.
So if I took a box and I pushed on a corner of it over to one side, that would then give me some sides which are squares or rectangles and some which are now parallelograms. But you would just then miming pushing in the other direction as well. And what happens then? Have I got
all parallelograms or all rhombuses? Yeah, So I'm
But the thing that's just occurred to me is that the opposite pairs of faces on the shape will still be parallel.
Yep.
I mean, obviously there's a clue in the name here, right? It's the parallelist piped that you can have, but like the top and bottom face are still parallel. They're just no longer sitting on top of each other, and the front and back face might still be parallel, but they're just no longer in front of each other.
Yeah,
and so on.
Which is interesting because it kind of precludes it from being a prism. Yeah, because it's not always joined by rectangles. The faces don't match up perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, this is a shape which I certainly know I have friends who enjoy when a parallelepiped crops up in real life, and there is a counter that gets reset. Like there's definitely a subset of people I know who, whenever a parallelepiped occurs, or someone finds one in an example of something, they're like, reset the counter. We found, it has been 0 days since the last parallelepiped incident. But yeah, they're kind of, they're not one of the standard school shapes, right?
No. So I have a good story about this because they are definitely not one of the standard school shapes that you learn about.
And this is presumably why I don't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah. When I was in primary school, you can probably tell by the accent that I went to school in very rural Scotland, quite far north. So in the Highlands of Scotland, I went to primary school in the 90s. And it was make a net and turn it into a shape day, apparently. So, the standard school shapes to make would be like cuboid, cube, the triangular prism is a popular one. But those are your standard nets to turn into 3D shapes. And I wondered, at the age of 7, if I could make a cube entirely out of rhombuses. And so I did. I created what I now know is a parallelepiped. But I just want to explain how hard fought for that knowledge was, considering it was rural Scotland in the 90s. And it's definitely something which changed the trajectory of my life. So I created this shape, this 3D shape in primary school, and none of my primary school teachers knew what it was. And it would have been so easy for them to be like, oh, it's just a mystery shape, or it's not a shape, or any of those answers. But they put in the extra effort. So what my primary school teacher did was put it into a jiffy bag.
Is this are we cardboard? What have you made this out
yeah,
of?
we cut them out of recycled jotter covers. So yeah, okay. the previous years, the jotter covers are a bit thicker. Oh, I think jotter's a Scottish word. Exercise book. Notebook, yeah. So yeah, the previous year we'd taken the covers off of their notebooks and then cut out cardboard shapes from them and then masking taped them together. But yeah, so my primary teacher put it into a jiffy bag and posted it to the nearest university, because there was you can't Google something in the early 90s, and then we had to wait a couple of weeks, and I don't think anyone was really actually expecting a reply, but I got a letter back addressed to me, and they sent back the parallelepiped with it. So shall I read this letter?
Yeah. So I love the idea that it's just the nearest university,
yeah.
Just not we'll find the most prestigious that knows the most about 3D shapes. Just whichever one we could get this to most quickly. Yeah.
Yeah. So my letter says, "Dear Ayliean, thank you for agreeing to Mrs. Hossick showing me the very interesting shape you made. As background information, you may know that a rectangle," and I just want to point out, because it was the 90s, in this letter here, they've just kind of left a tab gap and then drawn in by hand a little diagram of a rectangle. There was no clip art shapes. So a rectangle, which is made squint, is called a parallelogram, and a square, which is made squint, is called a rhombus. A cuboid, in brackets box, which is made squint, is called a parallelepiped, pronounced parallelepiped. It's still written down, so it's still not super helpful. And therefore, your shape is a special parallelepiped. I have checked with the mathematics professor at Heriot-Watt University, and he, like me, is unaware of any name given to your shape further than just stated. I would like to congratulate you on making a special parallelepiped, which is a very hard thing to do, especially at your age. I do hope that this success will encourage you to enjoy the opportunities in mathematics, which I'm aware Mrs. Hossick and the other teachers at Ardeshir are keen to provide. Well done. So that's
wow, that is so cool. Oh my god, I just love the idea that someone took time out of their day to be like, oh, what, a 7-year-old made a parallelepiped?
Yeah,
to the Batcave. Like, it's amazing.
I know, and I think that this is such a pivotal example of how much impact a small piece of outreach can make. Because just for some other background context, and this is where the content warning would come in. So if you want to skip ahead a couple of minutes, we'll be past the sad part, but sad but important. So when I was growing up in rural Scotland, like many other families in Scotland, my father actually died of a heroin overdose, which obviously is heavy and really affects your kind of life trajectories, but it's not unique at all in Scotland. We have the highest rate of drugs deaths in Europe. The area which I live in right now, this is a current up-to-date statistic, you are more likely to die of a drugs misuse death than a car accident. And yeah, car accidents are everywhere. So this kind of happened in tandem with me receiving this letter. Both of those things happened at the age of 7 years old. And at that point, I did not know anyone that had ever been to university. None of my family had been to university. It was almost unheard of. From my cohort in primary school, there was me and one other girl who ended up going to university out of the entire year group. And I really think that this letter was an insulating factor which protected me against the effects that you can horribly statistically predict after having life events like that happen. And my family were so proud of having this letter here, which had my name and also the name of a university in it. So much so that the letter is kept in a special box, and the parallelepiped we still have.
Oh my god!
Yeah, so here it is.
Oh, that's actually it.
Yep.
I mean, we're recording on a video call, but I mean, with Ayliean's permission, we could put a photo of this as the image for this podcast, because this is such a cool object.
Yeah.
And you can see the love that's gone into it as well. It's like very much a 7-year-old's parallelepiped made out of exercise books, but it is also pretty good. Like
Thank you.
Because I was sort of wondering, what is it like, this thing? Because presumably if you just cut arbitrary rhombuses, they aren't going to go together, are they? So you've had to do something. Are they all rhombuses?
They're all rhombuses, so that's what makes it a special parallelepiped, because it's like regular in a way. And so for a long time I was really annoyed that this didn't count as a platonic solid, because all of the edges are the same length, but obviously the angles aren't. And also you do have the same thing happens. You've got 3 rhombuses meeting at each vertex, but some of them are much pointier than others.
Yeah. There's the pointy ones at the ends, and then I guess the other 4, I'm going to say 4, 6. How many others are there? They're all identical. Yes. There must be 6, right? 1, 2. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess if you allowed that to be a platonic solid, there would then be infinitely many variants on a cube as it gets squashed, I suppose.
Yeah,
I literally just remembered that this started off as a cube. I was like, how many more corners will there be?
Right.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
yeah. It's just the number that there are in a cube, but it's just been squidged, yeah.
Yeah, so my particular parallelepiped is like taking 2 opposite corners, so like a front left and a bottom right, I suppose, 2 diagonally opposite corners, and then kind of pulling the cube that way rather than having it flat and squishing it. But yeah, this is my actual parallelepiped, and it lives in this Tupperware tub. And my family were so proud of me, and I genuinely do think that this letter is one of the the main reasons that I could make it to university, because I had that belief then. Like, it didn't seem like something that was impossible and unattainable, because I'd already done this, and I have it written there in this letter. It's a very hard thing to do, and you should go on to do mathematics. And so I did. And it also motivates me a lot in terms of outreach, because this is such a small, tiny letter. And I found the person that sent me this letter as an adult. And they did remember sending it, which was really cool. Shout out to George Gibson. But so they remembered sending it and thinking it was cool that there was a 7-year-old who made a parallelepiped. But they didn't, think about it every day for, the rest of their life, like I essentially did when I was going through school.
Yeah, there's an asymmetry there, I guess, as in how much impact this is going to have on someone's life. But yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, it's low. It's not no effort, but it's low effort when you think about all of us do maths outreach. This podcast right now is maths outreach. And I'm sure it will have an impact, but just something so incredibly small as writing a personal letter to someone who has no connection to a university can really change the trajectory of someone's life.
Yeah, and I guess the modern analogy for this would be like email now, right? Because obviously no one sends letters anymore. In those days, that was the way that you contacted people. But I often get emails from people either who've been to see talks that I've done or who've seen a video of me on the internet. And they just say things like, I want to be a mathematician. What do I need to do? And I'm like, oh my God. None of them have made a parallelepiped, unfortunately. They've done a cool thing and they were just emailing me to tell me about it. I would probably just compliment them on that and encourage them that way. But they're just like, what's important if I want to be a mathematician? And I'm just like, something resilience. But I take the time to write a little note back to them, because I think if someone's bothered to email you, they're obviously looking for some kind of connection and they're looking for guidance. But it's a small thing for me. Like, it takes me 2 minutes to just dash off a reply. And I guess it's that same thing that, this is the kind of thing that I just know, if someone asks me, what is this shape? People do, right? People constantly message me and say, what's this shape I've found? I'm like, just look on Wikipedia. That's what I'm doing. But mostly I'll have a rough idea of where to start looking. And, it's not a big deal for me, but for someone who doesn't have that answer, it's and it's also nice to know that someone is actually paying attention to you in that way.
It made me think about, we keep doing these sort of schools outreach things, and last week we had a year 7 group in, and the teacher said just a whole bunch of them have just never had anything to do with the university before. And she said as the coach was getting close, they were just getting so excited about, that might be it, that might be the university, that might be one of its buildings, and all this sort of thing. And it's just like this ordinary place where I go, and it's it's an office with some classrooms. But that's sort of amazing, and it's hard to remember that, isn't it? Because nobody in my family had been, I'd not been in, and all this sort of thing. But somehow it's hard to remember that now from the position that I'm in, where I just work there, and it's where I have my lunch in between meeting, that sort of thing.
And I guess it also, it makes a big difference if you're, from a family where both of your parents have been to uni or they work at a uni, then it again wouldn't have that same excitement for it, because it's just a place that you hang around while you're waiting for mum or dad to finish work, But, at the same time, it's sort of nice that these places that are, there's a lot of things about universities nowadays that are less than ideal, but they are theoretically these sort of temples of knowledge, right? They are the place that you go to fill yourself with knowledge. And I think there's something really kind of nice about that to sort of aspire to, I guess. And, as someone who spent obviously far too much time in and around universities, again, they hold no mystery for me at all anymore. But there's always been this thing that this is where the knowledge is. This is where the people learn new things and discover new things about the world. And that I guess will always be true, because that's where a lot of research happens. Obviously, research happens in other places as well. But it's really nice that that can kind of extend out, and outreach, I guess, literally is that, right? It's trying to bring people in.
Well, the building is just an office with some classrooms, but universities, I guess they are made of bricks, but they're mostly made of people. And it's as you say, it's the knowledge, the sharing of knowledge, I don't know, the prospect of becoming part of a learned community. Everything about growing up in rural Scotland is isolated. And yeah, I think that I did not realise until I went to university just how academically isolated I was. You know, because I went to school. I thought that was, you know, I go to school and I'm doing it, I'm nailing it. But I didn't have that kind of wider context of it. You know, I made it all the way through my maths degree, like my undergrad degree, without ever knowing who Martin Gardner was. And I really hope that doesn't happen nowadays. But if that is the case, then if you're listening to this podcast right now and you've never heard the name Martin Gardner, then I'm honoured to be able to tell you should go and look up some of Martin Gardner's stuff. But it's all these kind of like recreational classics that are considered classics. Where do you get them from? There's a kind of cultural capital to be talked about at universities as well. And also, this is just like a silly aside note, I did not realise till my third year of university, this is embarrassing, I didn't know what all the numbers everyone was talking about were. Like, oh, I'm on track for a 1-1 or a 2-1. I was like, I thought we're all just here to get degrees. I didn't know we were keeping track. Nobody sat me down at the start of university and said, here's what you need to get and here's what the different numbers are. So yeah, it was a hard learning curve. But yeah, I think that all of the outreach things that you're doing with the podcasts, that I know all of us do together as various different forms, they kind of help make that cultural capital more accessible, and all of the things that we think, oh, that's a problem that you would give to children, they're still worthwhile talking about with anyone that you meet. We should have more maths conversations for sure.
Yeah, I mean, this is something I've been thinking about a little bit recently, because there is a concept of, I guess, science capital that people use in the world of kind of science communication and promotion, that's like, you know, given an individual, it's described as a bag of things that you have, like that you're imagining an actual physical bag, but it's essentially a collection of all of the different ways in which your life and your circumstances have put you in a situation to feel like science is a thing for you. And, you know, it could be anything from like your background, from like what your parents do, the kind of school that you go to, how good your school is, how well resourced your school is, you know, what cultural institutions there are near you. Do you live near a science museum? Is it easy for you to go and visit one? Do you have lots of books at home? Do you have lots of science toys and all of this kind of stuff? And you know, what kind of role models do you have? What kind of things do you watch on TV? And all of these things, like huge number of different aspects of someone's existence, will feed into whether or not they are the kind of person who thinks that science is something that they can get into. And it's this sort of research concept that kind of researchers in science communication have built. And I think it's a slightly more helpful way of thinking about it than just like, how do we get kids into science? Like, actually, what are the barriers to some kids getting into science? Because there might be some kids that are absolutely, you know, intrigued by this idea, but they just don't have access to any of the things that would allow them to explore it properly. And I'm sort of interested in the idea of maths capital, whether it's different to science capital, because there'll be a lot of similarities and overlaps, but I guess there'll be subtle differences because of the way sort of maths is and the way maths interacts with the world, and also the way people perceive maths. I guess generally it's got a slightly different image, but you know, this idea that like things like that letter are things that will be a massive boost to your maths capital, because they'll make you feel like this is the kind of thing that people like you are allowed to do. You know, and it's, as much as it sounds ridiculous that anyone might think they're not allowed to be into maths, like that is an impression that some people get, and they get it strongly reinforced by things around them. So yeah,
that's very true.
And the thing that you see in the sort of research findings is that kids will go along to a science fair and have a lovely time, and they will report that they're dead enthusiastic and they love science and whatnot, but they don't see it as being a thing that they'll do for the future, because they don't know anyone who does that. And that's, you know, related to this concept, right? It's kind of, yes, I enjoy it, but obviously I'm not going to do it, because why would I be the person who does it?
Yeah, and it's not to say that you can never come from a situation where you don't know anyone who does it and go on to do it, but it just is so much more of a barrier, I guess, that, you know, that it makes it a lot more of a big step for you to do that. And, you know, as much as it's nice to imagine that everyone has an equal opportunity and everyone can go to uni and everyone can do this and the other, like, these are the kinds of things that you need to address, I guess, in society if you want maths to be for everyone. Yes.
And this is, I mean, you'll know this, but, you know, there are little opportunities, not necessarily writing to someone who's written to you with an object, but you know, like in this a session I ran last week, where this kid just had a really clever way of solving this puzzle that I'd given, and so I had my solution, and this was just a really clever way of thinking about it. And so at the end, I sort of said this to the room, and I said, "Here's a really clever way to think about this thing that this person over here just taught me." And because I'm the scary maths person who teaches maths at university, and here I am. You know, they don't know that I'm just me and I'm an idiot. And, you know, and here I am sort of saying that was worth knowing about. That was a thing worth having. So I feel like there's lots of opportunities like that, but they're quite small and you have to look for them.
Yeah, I guess my question for Ayliean would be, have you now found yourself in the position that people are writing to you and saying, "Hey, Ayliean, I found this thing. You know, is this a nice, interesting bit of maths?" Or like, how do I get into maths? Or, you know, how can I be like you because you're a really cool person that does maths?
I am very, very privileged that I have had a few people send me emails and DMs kind of saying that that the videos that I put out make them feel like there is a place for them in maths, especially people who are part of the LGBTQIA plus community, who are obviously welcome in maths. But yes, I do love receiving those emails. I haven't really had anyone show me a shape. I have had a few people email me letting me know that they have solved the Riemann hypothesis and if I could check that, but I am wholly unqualified to check if anyone has solved that. But my friends message me every so often and ask me what shape things are. I much prefer it to the, "Oh, you're a mathematician, what's 3,486 divided?" But yeah, ask me what a shape is.
So tedious. Yeah, it's much better. I know.
But I did wonder when you were talking about this, kind of someone writes to you with a thing and it's so easy just to send them a quick reply. And I thought, yeah, but the case where you don't do that is when they claim to have proven Fermat's last theorem or whatever. It's just sort of like, oh God, oh no, what do I do with this? And I usually just reply and say, it's not my area, good luck to you. Because that's true. You know?
So yeah, I was really happy when I received the letter, like letting me know what the parallelepiped was, and if I can do that for other people, that would be cool. There was a brief moment when the letter had been sent and there hadn't been a reply, where a rumour went around my primary school that I'd invented a shape, that because none of the teachers knew what it was, and it might be like a brand new shape. And I had plans, if this was a new shape, to call it the dimondular. I thought that was a really cool name. Like, oh,
yeah,
here's the 3D
that's what I'm calling it now. Like,
yeah.
Just the specific regular one, right? The one where
it's
all
this
rhombuses
special. All rhombuses, the dimondular. And then, you know, then I kind of matured a little bit and went to university and I was like, okay, cool. So, you know, maths is more discovered than invented, and we've named all of the shapes. We've got them all. And then boom, last year, hat comes out of nowhere, turtle comes out of nowhere, spectre. I was kicking myself that there definitely still are shapes to be discovered, and they will be discovered by amateurs, like continuing the great mathematical tradition from like Marjorie Rice to David Smith. Unfortunately not me, but near miss.
Do you know what's going on with this letter? So they've written to somebody at Heriot Watt, is that?
So they sent it to there was like a role in Highland Council at that point, because a very large, it's by land mass, it's the largest council in the UK. By population, not so much. But so it has some challenges in terms of consistency across the council. So they appointed a person to be the maths coordinator for all of the council. So the primary school sent it to the maths coordinator, and the maths coordinator sent it to Heriot Watt University.
Okay, because I saw that you read this bit out, but I have checked with the mathematics professor at Heriot Watt University, and he liked me, and I wondered if this was another academic at Heriot Watt talking, or whether this is the maths coordinator.
The maths coordinator for Highland Council, which that role doesn't exist anymore, which is sad.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Well, that's such a lovely story, and I guess we if anyone didn't know what a parallelepiped is, they now do, and can sound the alarm whenever they hear one. But I think it's just really nice when there's a little story like that around something, because it makes it so much more memorable. Like, I'm never going to forget this shape anymore. Like, it's so good.
Can I put in one final parallelepiped fact, just for fun?
Yeah.
So this is for any of the geology nerds out there. So calcite, the element, I guess it's a compound. Calcite crystals form imperfect parallelepipeds, and because their atoms,
like a lattice.
Their atoms form a parallelepiped lattice structure, and so the crystals grow as parallelepipeds, and that also means if you drop them and smash them, they cleave into smaller parallelepipeds.
Amazing. It's just parallelepipeds all the
way down. Yep.
Yeah. Fantastic. So if people want to find you online, Ayliean, you've got TikTok, I believe, is a good place to find you?
So TikTok, if you like your videos vertical. YouTube, if you like your videos horizontal 80% of the time. Sometimes I accidentally put a vertical video on YouTube. I'm sorry. And also Instagram. So those are places to find me. If you are a young person or know a young person, then I do weekly live streams every Tuesday and Sunday on Parallel, which is Simon Singh's platform. So that's parallel.org.uk. Since we mentioned drugs death, anytime I would have this platform, if you are over the age of 16 in the UK, you can carry naloxone. The training takes 45 minutes to an hour to do. You can carry it as a nasal spray, and it's an entirely preventable death these days. So I feel very hopeful about prospects of change in the future, and I look forward to everyone in the community kind of pitching in with that.
Cool, fantastic. So if you want to find me or Peter, or indeed Ayliean, on the internet, a good place to do that is at finitegroup.co.uk, which is our little mathematical community where we have a Discord and we do live streams once a month. And in fact, this podcast has been recorded in that Discord community, so some of our members are listening along. And yeah, if you join there, you can watch the live streams and be part of our little gang.
And this is exciting because the four of us, it's us three and Matthew Scroggs, who's a previous guest on this podcast. So we've completed the full house.
We've filled the group now, yeah. Both Peter and I blog at the Aperiodical, which you can find at aperiodical.com. You can also find all of the Internet Math Off on that website and more episodes of this podcast.
And if you would like to get in touch and try and email us an object to ask about, or otherwise...
Yeah, if you've discovered a new shape for Ayliean.
Yes. Or otherwise have a suggestion for something we could cover on the podcast, you can email us objects@aperiodical.com. The music is Funk Game Loop by Kevin MacLeod, licensed under Creative Commons.